In the year 2061, when Japan had collapsed due to economic policies and an aging population, Japan had become a fat piece of meat for capitalist countries. They scrambled and tore each other apart to seize control of Japan. Humanoid weapons called AMI were brought into the war. Japan's situation became worse than ever. This is Shiba. He and his group of friends had found the remains of an AMI. The group quickly took anything still usable and then left. They discussed how to use the parts for various purposes. But Shiba, who had taken the most, did not reveal anything. After that, Shiba was dropped off in front of his house just as the group heard about a scuffle between some Japanese people and foreign soldiers. Shiba did not care and walked into the house. Because in this era, being born Japanese was no different from being Jewish. They were looked down on, and even with talent or money, it was still difficult to find a job. Shiba asked himself what the point of living was. Feeling disheartened, Shiba went up the mountain again to look for something. This time, he went alone without inviting the other three, because he did not know their names or where they lived. He only knew them through a group of robot enthusiasts. For him, having a relationship like that was good enough. Shiba then went to retrieve the parts from the AMI he had hidden earlier. He wandered around until evening before going home. At that moment, he heard someone crying for help. Curious and afraid, Shiba pulled out his military shovel and slowly approached the source of the sound. Behind the leaves was a box. It made a sound and introduced itself as Guy, an artificial intelligence with its own consciousness and life. Shiba did not want to get involved in trouble, so he was about to leave, but Guy guessed his thoughts, scolded him, and even knew that he had hidden the communicator from the AMI. Guy begged Shiba to save it because its battery was running low. Then it suddenly told him to run because someone was coming. A military vehicle then approached. They found Shiba and questioned what he was doing at this hour. Shiba calmly replied that he was camping. They did not believe him, since this was a site where an AMI had fallen after a battle, and they had detected equipment theft. Two soldiers asked to check Shiba's ID. He was an orphan, living off his inheritance and government support. Even with a clean record, they still pinned him down and checked his backpack. When they found nothing, they let him go. Once things settled, Shiba returned to get Guy and brought it to an abandoned factory. This place had already been secretly claimed by him, and behind the security door was an AMI. He began charging Guy's battery. The AI was curious. Had he assembled the AMI alone? He told the story of how he had discovered the factory, like it was some kind of ruin. When he went inside to check, the tools were still there. It had taken Shiba quite a bit of time to unlock the secret room, and when he opened it, the AMI was already lying inside. However, the thing had a strange structure, as it was missing the central control device. Shiba had been studying it up until now. It was the only joy he had left in this fragmented world. Guy expressed admiration for Shiba's passion. Suddenly, it asked a question that Shiba had never thought of before. What would he do after the AMI was up and running? He remained silent. In response to that silence, Guy said it was fine, even if he did it just out of interest. Because back during the border wars, people still bought drinks and popcorn just to watch two robots fight. It was all for their personal interests and enjoyment. Shiba cut him off. He activated a signal jammer before leaving Guy to charge there. When the door closed, Guy began to act. It scanned the entire factory and controlled the machines to start preparing something. It had been 3 days since Shiba had left. The continuous rain made him very anxious. He was afraid that Guy would drain all the electricity in the factory. The next day, the military caught Shiba's group of friends while they were trying to modify a vehicle using AMI parts. The commander considered all three to be terrorists and presented a photo of Shiba, demanding they provide information if they did not want to die. Meanwhile, while Shiba was repairing his headphones, Guy picked up the signal and urged him to run from the house just as the soldiers stormed in. Not seeing him, they immediately started checking the nearby security cameras. Shiba ran to the factory and saw that the AMI had been completed by Guy. But he was not allowed to be surprised for long because the soldiers had arrived through the cameras. They saw 2 Oceania mechas and Shiba's 3 friends had been taken hostage. The commander demanded Shiba come out. suspecting him of being part of a terrorist organization. The three tried to explain that they were just city boys who liked modifying vehicles, but he would not listen and pointed his gun at them, forcing Shiba to come out. Shiba was about to do what he said, but Guy spoke up. Did he want to be captured and spend the rest of his life in prison, or would he resist and find a path through hardship, except being a fish trapped in a cage, or be a fish that leaps over the dragon gate and becomes a dragon? If he believed in it, then pilot this without hesitation. He chose to pilot the AMI with Guy. When the commander did not see any movement, he began firing. Shiba entered the AMI and inserted Guy like a key. After a few seconds of analysis, the AMI was identified as Kenbu. The retinal scan process began, and Shiba could now see everything outside. Guy appeared in a cuter form. After a bit of getting used to the cockpit, Shiba transformed the AMI into humanoid mode. Following Guy's instructions, Kenbu charged outside, surprising everyone. Shiba flew in and punched one AMI, then grabbed it and threw it into the other one. However, the enemy still fired back, forcing him to retreat and take cover. They continued to unleash bullets, putting him in a tough spot. One enemy unit jumped from behind, forming a pincer attack on Kenbu. At this point, Guy told Shiba to use the finishing move. With blazing eyes, it demanded Shiba shout the name of the move as coolly as possible. As both enemy AMIs charged in, Shiba shouted, "Iron Cannon Blast," and used his weapon to pierce one unit. He quickly grabbed the one attacking from behind and smashed its arm into the other. This was the first time Shiba truly felt alive. Immediately after, a soldier took Shiba's three friends as hostages and demanded he surrender. Seeing this, Guy told Shiba that it had it covered. It then changed its tone and said that those three were just tools for Shiba, that he had used them to gather the parts to repair Kenbu, and now that it was complete, they were no longer useful. Guy even insulted the commander to his face, saying he had lost track of the real terrorists and instead arrested and punished innocent civilians. How shameful. After saying that, the two of them left. Following that bold provocation, the two now had to live in hiding like this. That night, Shiba stopped to inspect Kenbu. He checked his phone and saw he was now wanted for terrorism. But being too hungry, he did not care. Shiba asked what they needed to do next. Guy said they had to cross the Seto Inland Sea and head to Okayama. That area was outside the control of the Oceania military, so they would attract less attention, but even if they were still pursued, they would just live in exile. That sounded reasonable, so Shiba took a nap to regain strength. The next morning, Shiba had to camouflage Kenbu, because earlier Guy had informed him that it needed to rest after processing a massive amount of information in one day. It needed sleep to avoid overloading once the camouflage was done. Shiba went to find something to eat because he had not eaten anything since yesterday. He approached a garden full of vegetables and thought to himself that since he was already being hunted like a criminal, committing a little more crime would not matter. So he went to the garden and picked a tomato. Just as he was about to take a bite, the owner of the garden showed up holding a sickle, scaring Shiba into bowing deeply and apologizing. The owner looked at him silently, then said if Shiba helped him, he would give him food after that. Under the kind farmer's guidance, Shiba harvested many kinds of vegetables. By noon, he got to eat cool tomatoes that had been soaked in a stream. After eating, the farmer asked him to help plant seeds. They worked until the afternoon. But Shiba did not feel tired. In fact, he felt happy with these new experiences. It made sense, since he had always lived in the city, so experiences like these were very precious. The farmer, having seen it all, invited Shiba to his home. His wife came out to greet him, and the farmer asked her to prepare a meal for their guest. She happily agreed and told Shiba to take a bath first. After bathing, he was treated to a grand meal by the couple. Shiba did not hold back and began eating. When he took the first bite, his tears fell unconsciously because it was completely different from the taste of fast food. He always ate it. Made Shiba feel genuinely happy. After finishing the meal, Shiba drank tea to rinse his mouth. At that moment, the TV broadcasted a wanted notice for Shiba, and in his speechless confusion, the old man said that he once had a son, but unfortunately, he died while participating in the border war. The two of them had promised each other to go fishing together when he returned, but it seemed that would never happen. That boat had been left unused until now. The old man said that if Shiba needed it, he would give it to him. He knew clearly that Shiba was not a terrorist, because no terrorist would bow down and apologize so meekly in the field after getting caught stealing food. On the contrary, Shiba even helped him tend the garden. The old man said that in such chaotic times, one must not lose faith in people, so he would give Shiba that trust. He also assured him that as long as Shiba stayed here, nothing would happen to him. Emotions surged in Shiba. Upon hearing those words, he kept thanking them to dispel the awkward feeling. The old woman said she would go check if Shiba's laundry was done. Shiba offered to help, and just then the doorbell rang. The old man told Shiba to hide, then stepped out to meet the town's police chief, who had come to check if any terrorists were hiding here. The old man, with a determined gaze, firmly stated that there was no one here. Still, the officer spotted Shiba's shoes, but because of the old man's credibility, the officer turned a blind eye. That night, Guy contacted Shiba. It had heard everything, and also knew the officer had ignored the matter. However, both it and Shiba knew that the old couple would be in danger if he stayed any longer. So the next morning, he left with a farewell letter. First, he expressed his deep gratitude for being taken in, thanked them for the meal and their warm words, and also asked for permission to borrow the boat. Once everything settled down, he promised he would return. In addition, Shiba made the house look messy, as if the couple had been attacked by him to prevent suspicion. Then Shiba connected the boat to Guy, and the two began their journey. Even so, Shiba still felt uneasy, as more and more crimes were piled onto him, things he had not even done. Guy confidently said it was fine, no matter how many crimes were blamed on him. As long as the truth came out, it would be resolved. Hearing that, Shiba felt relieved and departed. Guy informed him that in just a few minutes they would reach the other shore, but ahead was the border war zone, a brutal battlefield. Before they could prepare, Guy announced they were surrounded by Asian military forces who had set up an interception formation. Guy scanned the entire battlefield and confirmed there were at least 12 enemy matches. It was too late to flee, so the only option was to charge forward. Guy said that Shiba had already taken down Oceania. If he defeated Asia too, he would be a hero, though it was not what Shiba wanted. The chance to fight fired him up. As the Asian forces opened fire, Kenbu leaped into the air, landing on a broken bridge nearby as calculated by Guy. The two pressed forward. Kenbu charged and took down one Amai, and Shiba used it as a shield, pushing both into the water. The thrill surged through Shiba, and he charged forward again, taking out two more Amai. The enemy commander was astonished by Kenbu's agile movements. Guy identified 4 enemies firing from a distance. Kenbu dashed over, kicked 2 away, and grabbed a rifle to shoot at another charging Amai, but the weapon required identity verification and could not be used. No problem. Shiba slammed the rifle's handle into the Amai's head. However, more reinforcements arrived, and they were surrounded on 4 sides. Guy calculated an escape route. It detected a high-capacity battery nearby. If ignited, it would explode, taking advantage of the enemy's gunfire. Shiba had Kenbu throw several battery packs into the rain of bullets, triggering a massive explosion. Using the fire as cover, the 2 of them made a break for it. However, the Asian forces continued firing, hitting Kenbu's leg and immobilizing it. They quickly surrounded and restrained Shiba, then unleashed a hail of bullets on the cockpit to destroy it and kill him. But Kenbu was too tough for the first barrage to break through. The commanding officer continued to order fire until Shiba was killed. But just as they were about to shoot again, a sniper from afar took down one of the Amai. The Asian army immediately became alert, but the distance across the mountain range had completely locked their targeting. Each bullet fired took down 1 Amai, and once all had fallen, the pilot from the other side contacted Shiba, providing him with the location he needed to go to and giving him a password. Then, that pilot fired 2 smoke rounds to create a chance for Kenbu to escape. These were special interference smokes, making it impossible for the Asian army to track Shiba's position. After that, Shiba met his rescuer, thanked him, and introduced himself, also introducing Guy. However, Guy showed irritation upon seeing that there was another AI similar to it here. The other pilots I also greeted them. The four then boarded a transport vehicle and departed. The other I introduced itself as K, and the pilot was Gashin. Guy began scanning the surroundings to determine where they were going, and K explained that this road was built before the border war. It was a leftover from a highway project, privately funded and constructed in secret, so the enemy would not know about it, and they could travel safely. Then it was Shiba's turn to ask who Gashin was. With a curt and reserved demeanor, Gashin explained that the Japanese were piloting Aima and forming their own army with the aim of restoring Japan. Gashin called their organization Yatagarasu. Guy remarked that Shiba had encountered real terrorists. Shiba was then taken to Yata's camp, where he met the maintenance workers. Though they called him weak and effeminate, they still agreed to repair Kenbu. Then another person arrived, introducing herself as Risa. She led him to meet the captain of Yata's second unit, Kumai. After a brief introduction, Kumai asked Shiba a few questions that sounded like an interrogation, asking whether he had comrades or assembled Kenbu himself, and even asking if Guy was programmed by Shiba. Although a bit taken aback by these questions, Shiba calmly answered he found Kenbu already assembled and just set it up and repaired it, not even knowing if it would work. As for Guy, he found it in the forest, and it happened to activate when he inserted it. After some discussion, Kumai declared that Kenbu was Yata's property. It had a pair of sibling units designed based on the concept from an I named Johan, currently operated by Gashin. Kamui added that the reason Shiba could not activate it the first time he saw it was due to a missing part, which was supposed to be delivered to Kenbu, but the pilot and AI transporting it were attacked, resulting in Kenbu remaining dormant until Shiba came along. After all that, Guy angrily asked if Yatta was planning to take Kenbu back. However, Kamui said that would be too unfair to Shiba, so the second unit captain offered him a better deal, join them. They were not terrorists like the news claimed. They were a revolutionary army, not extreme in their actions, thus not terrorists. Moreover, since Shiba could repair and fight with Kenbu, they saw him as a good fit. Shiba hesitated, knowing that joining them would mean he would have to kill people. Gashin got angry, saying Kenbu was not a toy, it was a weapon of war. He then showed Shiba a video of many Japanese civilians being massacred, and pointed out that Shiba held in his hands the power to save them, yet still hesitated like a coward. Seeing Shiba's unconvincing face made Gashin storm out in anger. Kamui asked Shiba to forgive him, explaining that Gashin's father had once had the determination to restore Japan, but he died before fulfilling that goal. Gashin's rough attitude came from his desire to realize his father's will as soon as possible. Returning to Shiba's decision, Kamui said it was fine. Even if he refused, they could help him regain his citizenship, return to a normal life, live under a different name and identity. In exchange for returning Kenbu, after hearing all the terms, Shiba went silent, then said he would think it over. He went outside and sat alone. At that moment, Riza came to talk with him. Shiba asked why she had joined the Revolutionary Army. She told him that she once had a family, but they all died in a traffic accident, and the vehicle responsible was a military transport from Baki, the Asian army. Thanks to diplomatic immunity, they were declared innocent, and even reversed the blame onto her family for causing damage to the military, demanding compensation. Thinking back on it still fills her with resentment, and she is certain that there are plenty of people in Japan who feel the same way. That is why she joined the movement to revive Japan, and so did everyone here. But Shiba had no such reason to join. His parents died of illness. Unrelated to the military at first, he thought assembling Kenbu was just a hobby, but when fighting alongside Kenbu and Guy, the feeling of metal clashing made his body surge with excitement. However, when he faced death up close, he was overwhelmed with fear and withdrew into himself when recalling that moment. Then, a gentle touch of reassurance came from Risa. She honestly admitted that she had been sent to persuade him to join Yara, But she reflected that if her own little brother were in the same position, she would not be able to encourage him. Either she would have told him to run far away and live a peaceful life. She wanted Shiba to value himself more. How can a person be happy if there is no one by their side? Remembering everything he had been through and the elderly couple, he finally made his decision. That night, QMI reported that headquarters had informed them the Asian military had increased security after they rescued Kenbu, so they would temporarily halt the plan to cut off enemy supply lines and return to headquarters. As for Shiba, Risa was not sure if he would join, while Gashi remained annoyed at his weakness. The next day, Gashi woke him up for training. He showed Shiba the list of drills they had to complete that day and did not give him a chance to refuse. He just started the session, forcing Shiba to follow along. Meanwhile, Guy was being shown the accessories that would be equipped on Kenbu by Risa. That afternoon, Shiba was exhausted from training, and Gashi told him that this was only the beginning before leaving. At night, Shiba lay in bed listening to Guy rambling endlessly about how majestic Kenbu was. But he was too tired and fell asleep. The next morning, he was dragged off for training again by Gashi. That night, he was too worn out to eat. But everyone around him had seen his efforts and cheered him on. Someone even made him a special drink, and after drinking it, he fell asleep. The next day, he was again called out to train. Meanwhile, Guy watched Kenbu being gradually completed, and Shiba himself was steadily improving. That day, Gashi gave him an early break. As Shiba returned to change clothes, Risa called him to see Kenbu. It had been fitted with new armor, as well as a sword and cannon mounted on its back. Shiba was amazed by the craftsmanship of the specialist. After discussing a few things with Risa, the two went to a nearby stream to bathe. Risa casually undressed in front of him, and seeing his embarrassment, she grabbed his hand and jumped into the water with him. The cold stream washed away his worries. After that, they talked. Risa told him that the day after tomorrow, they would leave this place and head to Hiroshima, and asked if he had made up his mind. Shiba said he was still afraid of fighting, but after spending time with everyone, he realized they were not bad people, so he would go with them. He wanted to learn and fight alongside Kenbu. Risa was overjoyed and patted his head. That night, he told Guy about his decision. Guy said he would always support Shiba because Shiba had saved him. Risa reported Shiba's choice to Kamui. The next day, Guy and Shiba tested the new Kenbu thanks to the upgrades and maintenance. It moved faster and more agile than before. With one slash, it sliced cleanly through a large boulder. After the trial run, Shiba got down from Kenbu and met Gashi. He expressed his amazement at the upgrades, and then Gashi took over piloting it. Gashi needed to familiarize himself with Kenbu in case Shiba died, and Shiba should do the same. Then the two had a practice match using each other's Ami, and Gashi's unit, named Johan, was guided by the AIK. Their friendly match was evenly matched. Even though Guy talked too much and annoyed Gashi, he calmly dodged every blast from Shiba. K calmly advised Shiba to switch weapons more flexibly when his opponent had figured out how to counter him. But Shiba was worried that if he fought too seriously, Kenbu would get scratched. While he was distracted, Gashi quickly closed in, and Kei instantly told Shiba to switch to a shield to defend himself. Right after that, he pulled out a short dagger and struck away Kenbu's weapon, then pointed his gun at it, but Gashi managed to grab another weapon and slashed Johan's shoulder. The result of the battle was a draw, and Gashi also acknowledged Shiba as a pilot. At that exact moment, the camp was attacked again. They were being approached by a black army. It targeted the transport vehicles carrying AIMA parts and began smashing them. Once finished, it turned its attention to the rebel forces. Just as its massive arm was about to strike down, Kenbu blocked it, and the two began fighting. Guy took note of the AIMA's arm, which was emitting heat. There was no data available on this thing, so they had to be extremely cautious. At the right moment, Sister Risa arrived to assist. She had only managed to fire a few shots before the army instantly teleported in front of her and killed her with a single blow. Her sudden death left Shiba in shock and unable to react. Guy called for him to return immediately to avoid another strike from the Black Army. Kamui contacted them, asking both of them to buy time so he could evacuate everyone. Meanwhile, Gashi, upon realizing that this was the army that had killed his father, launched an attack despite Kei's attempts to stop him. At the same time, his memories surged back on that day. Gashi had asked his father to let him pilot Johann instead of the training match. His father had agreed since there was no sign of danger. But shortly after he left, an emergency alert came in saying that a black army had attacked his father's team. When Gashi ran to find him, he saw that the army had already killed his father. Gashi, filled with rage, swore to avenge his father. Kei told him to calm down because his vitals were unstable and that he would not be able to control Johann properly. The Black Army swung its weapon at Gashi, and Kenbu quickly rushed in to save him. However, Gashin was still in an unstable emotional state and told Shiba to get lost. At this moment, Kamui contacted him and urged him to cooperate to defeat the army. If both of them lost, everyone here would die. Kei also tried to calm him down to stabilize his vitals. The problem was that both eyes, Guy and Kei, had no data at all on this army to formulate a combat strategy. The only information they had was that this army attacked every location it passed. Both the Asian and North American armies had taken heavy damage from it. They called it Ghost. Ghost launched the first attack with a powerful lightning-fast strike that pushed Kenbu back, followed by a combo of continuous blows against Shiba. Gashi provided cover fire. Ghost jumped backward and used a weapon from the rebel army to attack. This shocked Shiba, as it was able to use the weapon without identity verification. Kei explained that this was what made Ghost so dangerous. In the battle against Gashi's father, Ghost had lost one of its arms, then took the arm from another army and made it its own. Ghost kept moving, despite being targeted by Johann's aim. Kenbu rushed in to stop it. Gashi got angry and told Shiba to get out of his firing line. Guy retorted that if that is the case, then he better stop missing his shots. Although they argued, they still coordinated well, attacking while retreating and frustrating Ghost. At that moment, Mizuki from the maintenance team called in to deliver weapons. Gashi locked onto the target and fired a flash round at Ghost, then ran with Shiba to the designated location. Ghost detected them and immediately gave chase. When both retrieved their weapons, Ghost also arrived. All three readied for combat. Ghost launched the first attack, but Kenbu's heated blade blocked it. Johann provided cover fire. Ghost blocked the shots and accelerated toward Johann. Kenbu ran in to help, but was met with Ghost throwing Johann at him. However, Guy had anticipated this and leapt high into the air. Kenbu switched to a firearm and fired downward, as Ghost blocked with its arm. Shiba had already reached it, severing one arm and pinning it down with a stab to the leg. The rest was up to Johann. Gashian switched to armor-piercing rounds and kept firing at Ghost's head. However, even without a head, it was still able to move. It jumped behind Kenbu and pushed him into Johann, pinning them both to the ground. Then Ghost activated its internal reactor to self-destruct with both of them. The temperature kept rising, and Ghost turned from black to red. Neither Shiba nor Gashi could escape, and they both resigned themselves to their fate. Just then, Kamui brought in artillery support to attack Ghost. He ordered them to aim at his joints. Once they were loosened, Kenbu and Johann broke free and ran for cover. Both waited for Ghost to explode, but it just kept heating up with no sign of an actual detonation. That afternoon, Kamui called the two of them. He informed them that since they had suffered heavy losses in both personnel and weapons, he would return to headquarters first to report the situation. The task of cleaning up the battlefield would be entrusted to Gashi and Shiba. They needed to finish before the Asian army arrived. When there was no longer any heat signal, Gashi and Shira went up to search the area. While scanning for heat signatures, Shiba found the necklace that Risa used to wear. He went down to pick it up and burst into tears for her. That night, just as Gashi had predicted, the Asian army arrived, especially that red-haired man. He had the ability to simulate an entire battle just by looking at its traces. He was surprised by Shira's progress in combat and became even more eager to meet him after sensing that he had defeated Ghost. Shira was still devastated over Risa's death, and Gashi could understand because he had been through it before. The red-haired man from the Asian military had gathered information about all three MI units and recreated them. Kenbu was the original unit, Johann was a sniper type, and Ghost still had no data available. The redhead could devise countermeasures for all three. He knew that Ghost had removed its limiters to reach such incredible strength. Perhaps the AI inside had evolved on its own. The redhead then called his comrade Ray to prepare an MI unit for him. The next day, while walking with Gashi, Shiba thought things through and decided to leave the rebellion because he was afraid of dying. This time, Gashi did not object and said he would inform Kamui. Since Shiba was no longer participating, he was no longer allowed to pilot Kenbu. Gashi told him to hide it somewhere and report its location. Before they parted ways, Shira told Gashi to take care. Gashi replied that he would decide his own fate, but Shira shouted that he was terrified of dying and even more terrified of seeing people he knew die. Gashi told him to stop rambling, saying that cowards had no right to talk about death. Later, Shira hid Kenbu near a stream and left with Guy. When they exited the forest, thanks to Guy, who had overwritten the data on Shiba's ID card and wanted notice. He was not recognized by civilians. Guy asked what he planned to do next. Shiba said he planned to visit Risa's house and return her necklace. Though he did not know if anyone was still there, he just assumed she had relatives. Guy had already looked into the accident involving Risa's family, so he was able to find her address. Shiba thanked him, and they joked together before heading off. Elsewhere, two men dressed like the red-haired soldier were having a discussion. They had been turning Japanese civilians into criminals and then pretending to punish them. Using the excuse to gain merits and glory, they saw the Japanese people as no better than savages. Meanwhile, Shiba had arrived at the address Guy had given him, but the house had been completely leveled. He thought Risa might still have relatives, and decided to ask around. However, everyone who saw him avoided him like he was a curse. While he was confused, a little girl approached and asked if he was Risa's friend. Then, a man with a dangerous expression came up and asked who he was. Shiba introduced himself and showed Risa's necklace. Seeing it, the man took him away in the car. He told Shiba that Risa's house had been destroyed by the Asian army. Her family was all gone, and there were rumors she had joined the rebellion. That was an order issued by the new Governor General. Others had faced similar fates. Even their relatives were targeted. It was no different from oppression. The man then took him to a night diner, where Shiba met a group of young people who, according to the man, were Risa's childhood friends. He had called them here to hear news about her. They laughed and reminisced about their memories with Risa, not knowing the truth in the end. Shiba had to tell them. Everyone was shocked. Some could not hold back their tears. After all, she was a good person who always helped others, just like her nature. They asked Shiba what he would do next, since he did not know where her relatives were. He planned to place the necklace at her family's grave. When he asked for its location, everyone went silent. The shop owner finally spoke up. She knew where it was, since it was on a mountain and would take a long time to reach. She offered to let him stay the night. Shiba declined, but everyone wanted him to stay. They even decided they would all go together to visit Risa's family grave. They later held a hot pot party and invited Shiba. Although he was still hesitant, the old man persuaded him to stay. After the meal, Mr. Nose and his daughter left. While they were talking and crossing the street at a green light, suddenly, the car of the governor stopped right in front of them. He rolled down the window and blamed the old man, saying that his clothes got dirty because of him. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the redhead had received a new AMI model. He was so excited that he could not wait to drive it and hunt down both Kenbu and Ghost. Speaking of Ghost, it was currently hiding in a cave and repairing itself. The next day, people began to stir over the sudden disappearance of Mr. Nose and his daughter. When they went to his house, they found all the belongings had been moved. Everything was strangely suspicious. One member of the group spoke up, saying he had heard that if someone was targeted by the new governor, they would disappear overnight. Those people all shared one trait: they had anti-government beliefs. Rumor had it they were being sent to the mainland, and it was no different from human trafficking. Guy and Shiba heard the entire story, and Guy confirmed that what this babbling guy said was true. Guy explained that he had checked all the surrounding surveillance cameras from the previous night to the present, and since no military vehicles had left the city, It meant Mr. Nose had not been sold yet. However, Shiba did not have enough credibility for others to believe him, so Guy picked a random guy from the group and exposed his darkest secret, making everyone start to believe and agree to go confront the governor to demand the return of Mr. Nose and his daughter. On Geishi's side, he reported Shiba's choice. Kamui sympathized with him and also mentioned that, upon returning to headquarters, he would have a new teammate, a pilot equipped with a frame design based on Kenbu, back to the governor. He was discussing profit splits with his accomplices. They planned to sell Mr. Nose into forced labor and his daughter to some perverts. At that moment, a report came in that Japanese citizens were gathering at the gate. Meanwhile, Shiba chose to stay at the restaurant. News then arrived that the protesters had all been arrested. They were charged with anti-government crimes and taken away. Guy also found that the dispatched vehicles were military trucks sent to clean out the homes of those about to be sold. Guy told Shiba to leave immediately because they were about to arrive. After ending the call, the restaurant owner gave Shiba the location of Risa's family grave and asked him to deliver their regards. As for matters there, they would take care of them themselves. Shiba was then thrown out just before the military arrived. After that, the entire group of Mr. Nose was captured. They were marched down the street, and it was announced that they would all be executed for opposing the government. Shiba watched everything on his phone and felt deep sorrow for them. One person was even shot by the governor without reason. Shiba burst into tears, realizing how cowardly and weak he had been, always running away and leaving behind those who helped him. Guy spoke up. If you hate yourself that much, why not change and become a better version? He would always be there to support him. With that, Shiba regained his resolve. From within the spring, Kenbu's eyes suddenly lit up. That afternoon, just as the people were about to be executed, and guns were aimed at them, a tremor halted everything. Kenbu leapt out and used a shield to protect everyone. The governor ordered an attack, but those forces were too weak to be called. Am I? Shiba grabbed one and hurled it into another, neutralizing them both. Then he raised Kenbu's fist right in front of the governor, terrifying him. This was what true power looked like. The man trembled and begged for his life. Then, Guy broadcasted the governor's illegal human trafficking operation to the entire world. The redhead laughed out loud, exclaiming, "Bravo!" Over and over, Shiba warned the governor that if he ever touched another Japanese person again, he would visit his home every night. With that, he left, and Mr. Nose and his daughter were also freed by the people. Early the next morning, Shiba arrived where Gashi was waiting. He also left Risa's keepsake at her family's grave. Long ago, in a pottery village, little Shin followed her grandfather in making wonderful ceramic works. Under his hands, everything became refined and exquisite. But one day, the Asian military came to seize their land and workshop. They did not allow her family to refuse. Her grandfather could only watch as the workshop he had built his whole life was destroyed from that day on. He never made pottery again. Seeing him like that, little Shin promised him that one day she would restore the family's factory. Back to the present, both Johan and Kenbu were in a damaged state, with several critical parts broken. Both Guy and Kei also needed to recharge to operate properly. Gashi contacted Mizuki, who really wanted to help, but could not do much since she was on the move. Avoiding the Asian forces while heading back to headquarters, she informed them of the locations of the parts needed for both machines so they could repair them themselves before leaving. Shiba asked Gashi what to do next, and he took the boy to illegally siphon electricity to recharge the two eyes after disguising them so they could rest. Gashi and Shiba entered the city, looking for a place to stay at the hotel. Although Shiba was a city boy, it was his first time there, so he was a bit confused and was called a country bumpkin by Gashi. He tried to retort, but Gashi told him not to draw attention. After checking in, they headed to their room. Kei advised both of them to take a bath because they smelled terrible. Shiba was surprised that even an AI could detect odor, but Kei said even without that, just looking around would tell you everyone nearby was covering their noses. So as soon as they got into the room, the two of them scrubbed themselves clean. After bathing, they went to eat together. Gashi received a message from Mizuki that the parts had been delivered, so they would begin repairs tomorrow. Hearing that Shiba happily started eating, he noticed Gashi did not eat vegetables and asked about it. Kei explained that Gashi was a very picky eater, so Shiba teased him only to be glared at. Shiba apologized, saying he did not know. Gashi did not like that kind of joke. He had never had friends before, so he did not know how to communicate well. Kei and Guy told him not to worry, saying Gashi was just trying to act tough to hide how fragile he really was. The three of them then started arguing. Meanwhile, the European military, after hearing Shiba's provocative speech and receiving a significant blow to both the economy and reputation of Asia, began military preparations to confront him. The commander hoped that the flower of war would bloom here in blood and gunpowder. The next day, Gashi and Shiba set out to collect the parts. On the bus, Gashi told Shiba to look down at the Japanese city, now under domination, with its people suffering oppression and poverty. He said that one day he would reclaim this place. Then the two arrived at a bar where members of the resistance worked. When Gashi gave the correct password, the owner handed over the package to them. The owner, having heard Shiba's speech, also placed his hopes on him. Not long after they left, while the two were talking about responsibility, an explosion suddenly occurred in the distance at the port. The European army boldly launched an attack on the Asian zone. The Asians retaliated, but not significantly. Gashi and Shiba blended in with the evacuating crowd to observe the situation. Meanwhile, the Oceanic Army fired indiscriminately, not caring about civilians. The two boys arrived at the evacuation center. Gashi saw that the situation was dire for the Asian side, and they might stop evacuating civilians and focus on defense instead. Shiba could not accept that and wanted to do something. Guy responded to his desire by deciding to hack into civilian devices to guide the evacuation. Kei and Guy then hacked all the city's display screens and began directing people to safe route. However, it still would not be fast enough because the Oceanic Army was advancing too quickly. Shiba wanted to use Kenbu for support, but Gashi said that by the time they went to get it and came back, everyone would already be dead. The Asian commander also abandoned the refugees, believing that if the Oceanic forces killed civilians, public opinion would turn against them. The civilians tried to leave the building, but were stopped by Asian soldiers. Just then, a wrecked Asian AMI was thrown into the building, causing chaos. The Oceanic Army steadily advanced toward them. At that moment, another AMI appeared, moving at incredible speed. In no time, it was in the middle of the Oceanic forces. It introduced itself as Masaru, claiming to act in the name of justice. After introducing itself, it quickly sliced an AMI in half, then leapt into the air and struck down, using the defeated corpse as a shield before finishing off 3 Oceanic AMIs with a single thrust. Then, Masaru turned to the Asian forces and took down 3 enemies in one sweep. To the astonishment of both commanders, Masaru jumped incredibly high and flew straight toward an AMI artillery unit. Taking it down, after that he flew all over the city, killing any AMI he saw. The maps of both sides lit up entirely in red dots, signaling that their units were being annihilated, with losses reaching 70%. The Oceanic forces were forced to retreat. Shiba and Gashi were left dumbfounded as they witnessed the scene, their mouths agape, just as Guy announced that this was their new teammate. Having received the summon notice, the two quickly left. In a forest, during the late afternoon, Gashi and Shiba ventured deeper in and found Masabalansawesa. Shiba greeted first, but the AI on the other side abruptly cut him off. It introduced itself as Angelo, with an arrogant tone, expressing its disdain for male pilots and even demanding the two bow their heads in thanks for being saved by it. After berating Gashi and Shiba for a while, it finally revealed that the princess and her pilot would be their new teammates, and that pilot was Shin. She descended from the sub-commander unit without a word, then suddenly broke down crying. Afterwards, all 3 were transported to a nearby Yatta base. Shin was the first to apologize for greeting them with tears. She introduced herself and chatted with Shiba, while Gashi remained cold and gruff, saying little. According to Shin, that morning's battle was her first real combat experience. Initially, she was just a maintenance worker for Yatta, until Angelo suddenly appeared and told her to become a pilot, and she agreed right away. Angelo was very confident in its ability to judge people, though Guy and Kay teased that Angelo was just into girls. The three of them then started joking and goofing around, giving Gashi a major headache. Meanwhile, the red-haired man named Hardy and his friend arrived to meet their commander. The commander had summoned them because they had located the position of Ghost. It was now confirmed that Ghost was an unmanned machine with an AI featuring independent thinking. The one behind it remained a mystery. Ghost had already taken down forces from North America, Asia, Eurasia, and Oceania. High-ranking officials were desperate to possess Ghost to gain an advantage in the war. Hardy's superior ordered them to find it and, if possible, destroy Ghost to prevent it from falling into another nation's hands with the work matter settled. The superior moved on to a personal topic. He turned out to be Hardy's adoptive father. He asked his son to come home during the holidays since his mother missed him very much. Hardy agreed and left. However, while in the car, his friend knew well that Hardy would likely bury himself in work during the holidays. Hardy just had too many things he needed to accomplish. Afterward, Hardy dropped by his favorite bakery. The shop owner even gave him extra, knowing that the North American alliance was trying to restore Japan. Despite the efforts, the reality was that command still belonged to the North American military. Even if Japan regained autonomy, its leadership would still be under North America. Eventually, the entire country might become a colony. Hardy did not want the people to rely on other nations. They had to rise up and reclaim what belonged to them. After eating the pastries, the two continued on their way. Hardy opened up, not that he did not want to go home, but because he was adopted, and so were the other kids in the household. He could not fit in with them. He could hardly find anything that excited him until his father brought him into the military environment. The first time he saw an MI, he knew the military was his path. By the time he finished his story, the two had arrived at their mission area. Back to Shiba's group, they had arrived at a luxury hotel to rest. Only now did Shiba raise the question of why their three armies were so different from the ones in the military. Angelo explained that there was a company called Brenzen, which supported resistance groups from Japan. Officially, its headquarters were in Europe, but it was just a shell company. No one knew if the company had any sinister goals. But so far, everything was fine. As for eyes like them, they were configured by an external agency called ILS, short for Intelligence Learning System, an autonomous learning system. Guy seemed to be a special case. Although he shared the same codebase with Kay and Angelo, he was sent to the Oceanic region by someone. In any case, they were still considered siblings. When they returned to the room, Shiba asked Guy if he wondered why he was sent there, but Guy did not care, because he liked the current situation. Back to Hardy's location, he met two people, Roger and Sophie, who would assist him in eliminating ghosts. However, Sophie voiced her opposition to this mission because she believed that piloting army manually was less safe than using unmanned army units. Hardy explained to his subordinates that if they used unmanned units, they would need an entire platoon, and since the Asian and Oceania forces were still looming threats, they could not do that. Therefore, Hardy had gathered elite individuals to capture ghosts, and being chosen meant she was highly skilled. Now, they just had to follow his orders, and ghosts would be no different from a regular army. If they did not obey, then he was not sure. The next day, Shiba's group continued their journey to headquarters. Meanwhile, in the sky, Hardy's team was also beginning their operation. Ghosts sensed all four of them from the cave, and immediately leaped to the surface. Hardy landed right where it appeared. Ghost made the first move, rushing to attack. Hardy ordered a team to split up and strike from multiple directions. This tactic proved effective, as Ghost was struggling. It had never fought against a team made entirely of manned machines. They needed to destroy it before Ghost adapted to this new combat style. However, it was too late. Ghost focused solely on Hardy's teammate, forcing Hardy to retreat in difficulty. When Roger tried to help, Ghost intercepted the attack and threw Hardy's friend at him. The military fired missiles from the outside, but Ghost emitted a jamming signal that diverted their trajectory. Roger continued attacking, and was caught by Ghost. A third arm sprouted from Ghost's back. The black man was forced to sacrifice one arm to escape. Ghost had now fully adapted to Hardy's tactics and was preparing to crush him. Suddenly, Guy sensed that same killing intent again. Besides Shiba, the other two, and the I could not sense anything. Guy thought it was just him and ignored it. Back to Ghost, it used chain-tipped fingers to directly attack the pilots inside the aircraft, and then, while Roger was off guard, one of the fingers killed him from the inside. Unable to grieve for long, Hardy quickly calculated a new attack strategy. He and the other two charged in. Sophie and the other teammate advanced ahead to distract Ghost, but both were bound by threads it had laid underground. Despite this, Hardy kept advancing. When Ghost fired, he dodged by leaning his body and then leapt backward to shoot at its arm joints, but it blocked the shot and tried to counterattack. Suddenly, a bullet dislocated its leg joint. It came from Roger. Though he had died, the I was still active and completed the mission. Hardy then finished it with a bullet straight through its chest. It collapsed. However, just seconds later, it escaped with a military aircraft. Hardy, furious, swore he would kill it. As for Shiba's group, they arrived at headquarters and met Yudu, the representative of Yada. He was glad the three arrived safely, but said there was already work waiting for them. Someone wanted to meet them, a mediator between the Brenzan company and their organization. He introduced himself as Gobel. Gobel proposed a business partnership based on war. Everyone sat down to talk. Gobel cheerfully expressed his desire for long-term cooperation. So long as there was war, his company would have business. He was also generous with funding when needed. Furthermore, Gobel brought many new upgrades for Amai. He then led them to see a pair of armored grenade launchers for Johan and many other items for Kenbu and Masaru. Later, Yudu received a call and took Shiba's group with him. They arrived at a village deep in the forest. Then the whole group entered the house of a man named Yuji, a long-time real estate agent who was currently living temporarily in this village. He showed them his family genealogy data. Currently 9 people lived there, but a week ago they had lost access to electricity and water. While they were listening, a little girl suddenly ran over and hugged Gashi, calling him Dad. Surprising everyone, Yuji asked for their understanding, saying the girl had lost her father at a young age. Back to the main issue currently, the villagers are struggling to get through each day. After the water and electricity outage, Adu asked why everyone still chose to stay here instead of leaving. The man explained that their town had gone through war and they had moved to a refugee area, but that place was also shut down, so they were forced to return home. Others shared similar experiences. They wandered until they ended up in this remote village. Though life here was hard, the war would not reach this place. They treated comfort for safety. After hearing that, Adu said his group would help them as much as possible. That evening, everyone set up camp to stay. Shiba expressed his admiration for Adu's kindness. Gashi said Yada was not just a rebel force, they also helped fellow citizens in need. What was truly needed to rebuild the country was to earn the people's trust. The next day, it started raining. Everyone gathered to discuss how to resolve the villagers' problems to ensure the villagers' living conditions. They needed to fix the water, electricity, and food issues. Kamui suggested drilling a well, building a water wheel to generate electricity, and cultivating farmland. Everyone started working. Shiba and a few others went to loot machinery from old cars. Meanwhile, Adu asked Gobel to sponsor a few items. Gobel agreed, since it still made money. Everyone worked busily. Some built houses, some dug the well, and some worked the farmland. By the afternoon, they all sat down to eat together. Watching the children smile gave Shiba peace of mind. The next day, everyone resumed their work. While stacking wood, Shiba was called by Shen to go somewhere. The two went to a tent up in the mountains, where there was a kiln. She wanted to repair it. If successful, they could make bread, pizza, and even pottery. Shen also shared that her family had a pottery tradition. Hearing that, Shiba offered to help her. The two began restoring the kiln. While working, 2 children came by, curious, so Shen invited them to join. Day by day, as everyone progressed with their own work, Shiba's group also finished restoring the kiln. They tested it. With Shen's guidance, Shiba and the two kids made many items, like cups and plates. They only needed to fire and glaze them, and they would be ready to use. Meanwhile, Gashi's side had received the necessary equipment, and all that was left was for the well to bring up water. The water wheel also started spinning to generate electricity. However, Guys said this alone would not be enough for everyone's needs. Gashi's team also faced a problem. They hit a hard rock layer. K scanned the area and estimated the rock was 2 meters thick, which would be difficult to break through. But if they could manage, Angelo said, water would come out about 100 liters a day. Enough for the villagers. Mizuka proposed a method to handle it. Over the next few days, everyone kept working. The water wheel was upgraded to generate more electricity. But guys still only rated the power supply as barely enough. Then K called the two over to the well. Mizuka had designed a device that combined a laser with a piercing rod. First, they would use the laser to melt through the rock, then shoot the rod to break it. Since the idea was Guy's, she forced Shiba to do it, saying if he did not, she would be mad. With no other choice, he stepped up. Under guidance from the three eyes, Shiba aimed the lasers into position. Now, all that was left was to pull the lever, but Guy said he had to shout the skill name first. Humoring her, Shiba yelled, "Ultra Drill Breaker," and pulled the lever. Soon after, water from the underground spring started gushing out. They used the water pressure to accelerate the water wheel's spin, producing a stable supply of electricity. The lights came on. Things were gradually improving. The villagers bowed their heads in gratitude. After the trip, Shiba, Gashi, and Shin were sent on another mission to buy supplies for the Yatta members. They had to do it secretly. Looking at the long list, Shiba had no idea when they would finish. Just then, an acquaintance recognized Gashi. It was Yuyu. The whole group sat down to talk at the park. Shiba did not expect Gashi to have a brother. This was also the first time he had seen him smile like that. Kei told the two of them more about Yuyu. Yuyu used to work at the Yatta headquarters, together with Kei's parents. But after both of them died fighting against the Asian army, Gashi's father adopted Yuyu, and Gashi cherished him like a real older brother. When Yuyu suddenly left the organization, it deeply saddened Gashi for a long time. After some heartfelt conversation, it was time for Yuyu to leave. The two exchanged contact information, and then Yuyu left first. When Gashi returned to the headquarters, he took out a photo of himself with his father and Yuyu. Some old memories resurfaced. There was a time when the two of them accidentally got lost in the mountains. Gashi was very scared, but Yuyu reassured him. Even though they were not blood related, Yuyu always protected Gashi. Those were memories Gashi could never forget. The next day, Shiba's team tested new equipment. While checking that everything was in order, Gashi received a message from Yuyu. He was overjoyed. That is, until Yuyu invited both Shiba and Shin as well. Yuyu brought all three of them to the Japanese city he had established. Everyone living there was Japanese. There was not a single person from the Asian Cooperative's territory. Although not officially recognized, the city has 3,482 residents, equivalent to a small town. All decisions were made by the Japanese themselves, but it did not stop there. The district leader of this autonomous area was none other than Yuyu. Everyone adored him. The only thing he wanted was to see the carefree smiles of the children. He wanted to protect all of them. That was also why he left Yada, because his path and that of the organization differed. Managing this autonomous zone was extremely difficult, as he had to negotiate with the Asian army every day. Instead of fighting like Yada, he hoped that the city would expand even more in the future. Then it was time. So Yuyu left the three of them to freely explore. They had not walked far before locals started giving them many gifts, because they were Yuyu's acquaintances. Shiba and Shin went up a hill to enjoy the view of the city, while Gashi went to meet his brother after the meeting. Yuyu did not beat around the bush and got straight to the point. He wanted his little brother to leave Yada and join him in this city. He explained that due to the population cap, the number of residents could not increase. However, he could request the Asian army to make an exception for Gashi. He did not want his brother to wield a gun anymore. He wanted him to live a peaceful life here. Gashi could not give an immediate answer and asked for time to think. He then returned to headquarters. While he was still thinking it over, Goebel approached him and revealed a harsh truth. Because losing Gashi would negatively affect the company's profits. He claimed that Yu was a spy for the Asian army. Whether Gashi believed it or not was up to him. But Goebel emphasized that information is a commodity. Truth does not need to be adjusted. Besides, with a bit of reasoning, it was obvious. How could the Asian army allow Yu to establish such a large autonomous zone unless he was working for them? According to Goebel, in exchange for creating that city, Yu served them seizing land, leaking information, identifying rebel elements, bribery, and sometimes even blackmail. The older brother Gashi adored was protecting the Japanese by selling them out. If Gashi continued to stay in touch with Yu, it would only be a matter of time before Yada's information leaked completely. Losing one pilot was already a big loss for the company, let alone 3. Goebel advised Gashi to think carefully to avoid unnecessary serious consequences. If he still did not believe it, he could investigate. After hearing that, Gashi left in a dark room. Gashi told Kei not to mention any of this to anyone. He remembered when he lost his father, he just sat there in silence, deep in thought. And it was Yu who came to comfort him. He could not believe his brother would do something like that, so the next day, Gashi secretly returned to the city to investigate. After only a few rounds, he noticed many things were off. Supplies, whether medical or daily necessities, were severely lacking. Locals constantly complained. As he went further, Gashi saw a vehicle belonging to the Asian army heading toward Yu's office. As expected, they were using the delivery of essential goods as leverage to pressure Yu into providing information. Even though it clearly was not part of their agreement, he still had no choice but to comply. Gashi witnessed it all through the surveillance camera. After the Asian forces withdrew, Yu thought for a moment and then called Gashi. The two of them met outside the autonomous zone and headed to headquarters there. Yu met Kamui and Adu. He revealed everything. How he had cooperated with the Asian forces to establish the autonomous zone, and how they were trying to extract information from him to plan the annihilation of Yada. He suspected that Asia might use the autonomous zone as a base, so he advised them to withdraw their troops from the area. After revealing everything, Yu returned before the Asians could grow suspicious. He declined Adu's invitation to stay, but unexpectedly, Yu's car would not start. The maintenance crew checked and said it would take a full day to fix, so they suggested Yu spend the night there. With that, he no longer held back in the dead of night. When everyone was fast asleep, Yu secretly copied Yada's data, but as he attempted to escape, Gashi intercepted him. The two brothers began to argue. Yu wanted to protect his people, unwilling to see them die. While Gashi could not afford to sacrifice his own organization, the argument escalated until Yu turned to leave. Gashi pointed a gun at his brother, but could not bring himself to pull the trigger. In the following days, the 3 pilots drifted across the sea to meet Taohoku, a rebel organization similar to theirs. The 3 pilots took a different route from Adu and Kumai. The day before, they had discussed their movement plans with Goebel. He told them they might meet the Taohoku group, who were also working to revive Japan, but were currently being hunted down by the Asian European forces. Soon after, they spotted their destination, the island where the Taohoku group was hiding. At that moment, the island was under attack by the Asian European army. The defenders were desperately fighting back, but the enemy was using MI units to suppress them. Just in time, Shiba's group arrived to support. Gashi sniped enemies from afar, while Masaru and Kendo jumped into action, cutting down on my unit. However, the enemy was still too numerous, so Gashi deployed smoke bombs and ordered a retreat. Lieutenant Zelenoy, who was commanding this operation, witnessed everything, laughing gleefully. He said that next time he would personally enter the battlefield. After escaping, they met Commander Kono, who thanked all 3 of them for their help. Shiba looked around and saw very few people, hardly enough to be called an organization. Kono explained that they used to have many members, but since Zelenoy took over operations, he had heavily invested in MI units to hunt down and exterminate the Tauhoku organization. Kono's next plan was to attack the eastern side of the island where their allies were. In order to regroup, guys said that to increase their chances of success, they needed to scout the surrounding area to understand the terrain. The three of them then split up for reconnaissance, each with an escort. When Shiba reached higher ground, he noticed strange beams of light. His escort explained they were enemy signal devices deployed in large numbers. They did not detect humans, only MI, and if a signal was turned off, it would trigger an enemy alert. Shiba observed them and thought he could make use of that. Meanwhile, Zelenoy was relaxing in a bath, enjoying himself before the battle. His secretary objected, questioning why he needed to personally appear when they already had victory in hand, but Zelenoy said he liked it that way and would defeat Shiba's group himself. Shiba was taking position along with Gashin and Shin. As the fog grew thicker, Zelenoy boarded an MI and launched the sweep operation, ordering random artillery fire into the forest. Once they detected Shiba's group moving, they continued to bombard their path. Gashin scattered smoke bombs to jam the signals, but Zelenoy activated all the signal towers after spotting all three on the map. They fired to corner Shiba's group into one area. However, just as they were about to trap them, the signal suddenly vanished. Outside, Gashin had blown up a bridge, taking out many enemies. Kenbu and Masaru flew out from both flanks to wipe out the rest. Hacking into their system was easy, allowing them to fake their positions. Using the fog to conceal themselves, they took down the remaining small fry and headed straight for Zelenoy. Angelo and Guy charged ahead, eager to take him on, while Kei stayed behind and shot down two enemies behind Zelenoy. Kenbu's sword was the first to clash with him. When his staff came in to help, they were fired upon and had to dodge. Zelenoy was about to shoot Kenbu when Masaru returned and slashed his gun, damaging it. Despite being caught in a pincer attack from both sides, Zelenoy still managed to fight back. His sword was too hard to break. However, while fighting, his army suddenly stopped moving. Gashi decided to retreat, saying there was no need to kill him, while Zelenoy, furious, glared at them to a noble like him. This was no different from an insult. At that moment, both the sword and the armor on Ami shattered. Back with Shiba's group, after merging Kono's group with the remaining troops, they bid farewell. The trio boarded the ship to regroup with Kamui's team. After this journey, Gashi had become more positive. Not long after, the Shiba team met the maintenance crew again, but before letting them service Kenbu, Shiba asked to wash it first because it was quite dirty. Over at Hardy's place, Gubel somehow managed to contact him and propose the deal. He hid his identity and only said he was a merchant selling information the location of Ghost. To prove his credibility, Gubel revealed all the information about Hardy, Sophia, and Hardy's friend Ray. Hardy asked what price he wanted, but Gubel said he did not want money. This was his investment in their future relationship. After that, Gubel left and sent the intel to Hardy, who immediately gave it to the intelligence agency for analysis. Meanwhile, Adu had received a report from the maintenance department about the condition of the three pilots. After hearing it, he gave them time off to rest. After ending the call, Adu was told that a guest had arrived. As for the pilot group, while washing Amai, they chatted about the future and what they would do after Japan's restoration. Shin wanted to rebuild the pottery workshop at home, but she still had to avenge his father, and upon hearing that, Shiba promised to help him defeat Ghost. Shin also wanted to help. Gashi did not reply, but a smile appeared on his face. As for Zelenoy, after being played by a group of brats, he reported to his commander and requested to be transferred to the team that hunts the Yatta organization. The higher-ups approved his request. Meanwhile, Adu met Kamui again. Kamui showed Adu some photos of wounded Asian soldiers with unknown injuries, possibly attacked by another country's forces. Putting that aside, Adu showed Kamui a current map of Japan, which had been divided among 4 factions. If operations continued, the territory under Yatta's control would expand. Officially, it belonged to the North American Alliance, but Japan retained autonomous control. There was something that excited Hardy. During the entire time the four factions occupied Japan, they never fought each other to expand their territories, but that had changed recently. It was due to an enormous catalyst that caused massive upheaval, the original Amai. Kenbu more precisely, the self-evolving and learning AI inside Kenbu. Ghost had a similar AI, possibly even superior to Gai's. The more Hardy thought about it, the more he wanted to possess it. He decided to cooperate with Gobu, since it was mutually beneficial. A moment later, intel from the intelligence agency came at 90%. Credible Ghost was still within the Asian cooperative zone. Since it had adapted to their old strategies, Hardy needed a new approach to fight it. He asked Sophie from intelligence if they had tracked Sheba's group, but she said they had lost their trail long ago, and based on speculation, there were many possible directions they could have gone. After thinking for a while, Hardy invited Ray and Sophia out to get some fresh air. Meanwhile, after Sheba and Mizuru had finished maintaining Kenbu, Sheba, Shin, and Gashi disguised themselves to go shopping. Upon arriving at the market, the group split up to shop. Sheba was a bit overwhelmed by the crowds and accidentally bumped into Hardy. Sheba apologized and quickly walked away, but Hardy recognized his voice from earlier and had Ray follow and compare it. After finishing their shopping in the afternoon, Mizuru showed up and invited the group to relax in the hot springs at the bathhouse. They separated into male and female sections. Unexpectedly, Sheba ran into Hardy again. Without beating around the bush, Hardy revealed he was with the North American forces and explained his mission to capture Ghost, which he had failed. He then disclosed Ghost's current location, which struck a nerve with Gashi. Without letting them ask questions, Hardy left with Ray on the women's side. Sophie also informed them of the same thing. That night, Ghost attacked the Asian army base again, causing heavy damage. The next day, Sheba's team informed a duo of Ghost's location and about Hardy. Gashi, filled with the desire to avenge his father, wanted to go immediately, and Sheba was also willing to help, meeting to avenge Risa. However, a duo asked both of them to be patient until the information was verified. From that moment on, Gashi threw himself into training. After 2 days, the information was confirmed. Ghost was in Okunoshima, where it had captured the Asian army's strongholds. The army had retreated to the mainland to establish defenses in case Ghost launched a land assault. Currently, Ghost was asleep for repairs, and Kei revealed that there were still Japanese civilians on Okunoshima, abandoned by the Asian army. Now, defeating Ghost was directly tied to protecting the Japanese people and homeland. A duo then assigned the mission of saving the civilians and defeating Ghost to the 3 of them. The plan involved 2 teams. Team O would evacuate the civilians, while Team B, consisting of 3 pilots, would carry out a surprise attack on the place where Ghost was believed to be sleeping. After finalizing the plan, everyone split up to carry out their duties. In the following days, Team O worked to mobilize the island's civilians for evacuation, while Team B trained intensively for combat. Before long, the day of the operation arrived. That night, many boats sailed to Okunoshima. Team O landed and began evacuating civilians onto the boats, while Team B advanced toward Ghost's location. Meanwhile, Hardy sat back to reap the benefits. Ghost had already awakened and began hunting down remnants of the Asian army, destroying 2 army and targeting the commander who had once fought Sheba. Just then, the trio arrived and launched an attack, drawing it away as expected. Ghost targeted Shin, knowing she was not yet used to its fighting style, and kept closing in on her. Kenbu rushed in to help, and Gashi ordered them to switch to strategy B. The 3 of them lured Ghost to an open area. Masaru flew overhead to support. Kenbu fought Ghost, but it had evolved to have 4 attacking arms. Catching Sheba off guard and putting him at a disadvantage, Johan provided covering fire, drawing its attention toward both of them. Then Masaru fired an electric net to trap it. Johan attempted a finishing shot, but Ghost countered with wires from its feet, broke the net, grabbed Johan's head, and tried to crush it. Kenbu knocked its arm away and Masaru fired another net to restrain it. The 3 of them retreated to reassess. Ghost's power had evolved at an insane pace, its rapid development shocking them. Talking about evolution, gave Shiba an idea. Ghost caught up from behind, and Shiba told Gashi to execute strategy A. Kenbu lured it up the mountain. Guy located the ammunition storage and pulled it inside, as Masaru was already waiting at the front. Shin fired 2 layers of netting to pin it down inside the storage, and Guy sealed the door. From afar, Gashi took aim. The bullet hit the ammo cache, triggering a chain explosion that blew up the entire area, but before they could celebrate, Ghost stood motionless in the middle of the flames. Still, they did not give up and charged again. However, Kenbu was punched away, and Masaru was tossed aside like a toy. Gashi called the two to fight together as they had trained. Hardy continued, observing from afar. Whoever won, he would benefit. If Shiba won, the Ghost problem was solved. If Ghost won, he could collect Guy for research. Meanwhile, team successfully evacuated the civilians and even captured remnants of the Asian army. Back to the battle, the trio coordinated well, but even though it took damage, Ghost remained overwhelmingly strong. It flew in and destroyed Johan's rifle to stop his sniping. Guy suspected this was no longer just an autonomous AI, but piloted by someone. Despite their 3-on-1 fight, their winning odds were dropping fast. Just then, Kono called and ordered them to retreat, saying they had already accomplished half the mission, but Shiba refused. Knowing Ghost would never let them go, he promised to return alive and asked his uncle not to worry. Hearing that, Kono agreed to send additional supplies. The trio resumed their assault. Ghost punched Kenbu away and slammed Masaru into the ground, then broke Masaru's arm and took Johan's leg. Shun barely managed to pull Gashi away, and the two successfully went into hiding. Kenbu was observing Ghost from a distance. They used a thermal camera and discovered that the energy source it used was located in its tail. This explained why it could take on all 3 of them without expending energy while they did, and that was its weakness. If it continued to maintain a high temperature without releasing internal heat, it would eventually overheat. The 3 then regrouped and shared energy with each other. Johan and Masaru transferred all of their energy to Kenbu, so Shiba could take down Ghost. After that, Kenbu continued to fight Ghost. While the lieutenant and Johan got into attack positions, Shiba continued luring Ghost into the Asian military's AMI warehouse for an attack. It charged into the warehouse and then controlled the AMIS to fire at Shiba. But Kenbu had already jumped out and detonated the warehouse. Of course, Ghost still stood tall. At this point, there was a notification that the two had reached their position. However, Kenbu was gradually losing ground. At this point, Guy had no choice but to break the limiter. This was the only way to defeat Ghost. Without hesitation, he agreed. Sure enough, after breaking the limiter, Kenbu became faster and in an instant sliced off one of Ghost's arms. The two were now evenly matched. Kenbu lured Ghost into a burning area. Shiba and Guy coordinated to punch Ghost, giving it almost no chance to counter. When he destroyed another one of its arms, that was when the lieutenant jumped down and decapitated Ghost, and Johan destroyed its energy tail from a distance. Ghost collapsed, and Kenbu flew in to deliver the finishing blow. But the sword broke, and Kenbu's entire system overloaded at the same time. Ghost had also overheated and was emitting heat. In just a few minutes, it would explode from excessive heat. However, Ghost dashed into the ocean to cool down, preventing the explosion. Kenbu stood in its way, determined to die with it if necessary, unwilling to let something like what happened to Riza occur again. And to avenge Gashi's father, Shiba decided to sacrifice himself. He would die to protect everyone he loved. In those final moments, Shiba and Guy had one last conversation. No matter what, the two of them would go together to the ends of the earth. After saying that, Guy lost connection. Shiba thanked him for showing him that the world still held many beautiful things. Then, both of them exploded, along with Ghost. Tima had successfully evacuated the civilians. The atmosphere turned gloomy. Upon receiving a report that a pilot had lost signal, Adieu was notified. When they went to check, there was nothing left. But they could not grieve for long, as there were still missions to complete. Shin and Gashi said goodbye to Shiba and moved on. Meanwhile, Hardy recovered a few fragments of Ghost. Even more shocking was that its AI remained intact. Part 1 of the anime ends here. Farewell.